Dragon hatchlings were freezing to death until a single dad janitor held them to his heart. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The stars glimmered like distant beacons across the vast expanse of space as Maintenance Station Epsilon 9 drifted in the shadow of Jupiter. Inside its utilitarian corridors, Jack Sullivan moved with practiced efficiency, pushing his cleaning cart from one section to another. "Dad, can I have a pet dragon?" The memory of his 8-year-old daughter Lily's question from their morning call made him smile as he mopped the floor of the research wing. Earth was 3 weeks away by transport, and these daily video calls were his lifeline. "Dragons aren't real, sweetheart," he had told her gently. "But what if they were? Would you get me one?" Jack had promised that yes, if dragons were real, he would find her the most magnificent one in the galaxy. The memory warmed him as he continued his work in the cold, sterile environment of the station. As the station's head janitor, Jack knew every corner, every maintenance shaft, and every quirk of the facility. After his wife died 3 years ago, he had taken this off-world contract. The pay was better, enabling him to provide for Lily, who now lived with his sister back on Earth. 6 months on station, 2 months planetside. It wasn't ideal, but it kept a roof over Lily's head and allowed him to save for her education. Jack's radio crackled. "Sullivan, we need a cleanup in Lab 7. Priority 1. "On my way," he replied, redirecting his cart toward the xenobiology wing. The station housed various research teams, but Jack rarely paid attention to their work. His job was simple: keep the place clean, fix what was broken, and stay out of the way of the scientists. Today, however, would change everything. Lab 7's security panel glowed red, indicating a containment breach. Jack swiped his maintenance badge, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, chaos reigned. Shattered glass covered the floor, and a pungent smell filled the air. 3 scientists in white lab coats were frantically moving around the room. About time. Dr. Elena Reyes, the lead xenobiologist, glanced up. Her normally composed face was creased with worry. "We need this cleaned up immediately. Be careful with the broken incubators. They contain specialized atmospheric conditions." Jack nodded, pulling on his protective gloves. "What happened?" "Power fluctuation," Dr. Markuschin replied, not looking up from a tablet displaying rapidly changing numbers. The backup systems failed to engage properly. Temperature regulation in the primary incubation chamber crashed. As Jack began carefully collecting the larger pieces of glass, he noticed Dr. Reyes and her team huddled around a table in the center of the room. Their voices were hushed but urgent. "The temperature is still dropping," Dr. Chin said. "The portable units aren't stabilizing." "We can't lose this clutch," Dr. Reyes insisted. "The Draconis delegation will be here in 3 days. If these specimens die, the treaty negotiations—" "I'm aware of the implications, Elena," Dr. Chin cut her off. "But we've lost the specialized environment they need. Even if we get replacement incubators from Earth, they won't arrive in time." Jack worked methodically, ears perking up at the mention of Draconis. Everyone on the station had heard rumors about the upcoming diplomatic mission, the first official contact between humanity and the Draconis, a species discovered 2 years ago on a distant exoplanet. The details were classified, but gossip traveled fast in the confined space of a research station. As he moved closer to the central table, Jack caught sight of what the scientists were so concerned about. In a makeshift container lay 5 oblong objects, each about the size of a football. Their surfaces shimmered with an iridescent blue-green sheen that reminded him of abalone shells. But what struck him most was their subtle movement. Each object seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. "Are those eggs?" Jack asked before he could stop himself. Dr. Reyes turned, irritation flashing across her face. "Yes, Draconis eggs. Their homeworld was recently struck by a solar flare event that devastated their breeding grounds. These 5 eggs are from the last clutch the royal family managed to save. They entrusted them to us as a gesture of goodwill while we negotiate potential relocation sites for their species." Jack stared at the eggs, transfixed. Dragons, he whispered, thinking of Lily. Not dragons in the mythological sense, Dr. Chin corrected. The Draconis are an advanced sentient species with a reptilian evolutionary lineage. We nicknamed them dragons because of their superficial resemblance to Earth mythology, but they're nothing like. A sharp crack interrupted him. One of the eggs had developed a hairline fracture along its surface. Temperatures still dropping, the third scientist, Dr. Kayla Williams, announced. We're losing them. Dr. Reyes slammed her palm on the table. Damn it. The portable units just aren't maintaining the heat they need. These eggs require a very specific temperature range with consistent direct contact. On their world, the parent Draconis coil around the eggs, transferring body heat directly through specialized scales. Jack thought of his daughter's favorite bedtime story, a tale about a princess who saved a dragon egg by keeping it warm under her pillow. Sometimes, children's stories held more wisdom than science. What about body heat, he suggested. Human body heat? The scientists exchanged glances. Our body temperature is around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, Dr. Williams said. The eggs need to be maintained at approximately 101 degrees. Close, but not exact. And there's the issue of consistent contact. We'd need someone to literally hold them for hours, possibly days. I'll do it, Jack said, surprising even himself. Dr. Reyes frowned. Mr. Sullivan, you don't understand what you're offering. These eggs are priceless. If anything happens to them, they're already dying, Jack pointed out. And I understand more than you think. I'm a father. I know what it means to keep something precious safe. Before Dr. Reyes could object further, the egg with the crack emitted a soft, keening sound, high-pitched and unmistakably distressed. They're aware, Dr. Chin whispered. Even pre-hatching, Draconis are semi-conscious. They can sense their surroundings. The keening grew louder, and then another egg joined in. The sound pierced Jack's heart, reminding him of Lily's cries when she was an infant, desperate and helpless. Let me try, he insisted. What do we have to lose? After a moment of tense silence, Dr. Reyes nodded. Fine. Dr. Williams, help Mr. Sullivan prepare. We'll monitor the egg's core temperature. Minutes later, Jack sat in a reclining chair that had been hastily brought in from the station's medical bay. He had removed his uniform shirt and now wore only a thin undershirt. Dr. Williams carefully arranged the 5 eggs against his chest and stomach, securing them with a special thermal blanket designed to reflect heat back toward its source. Try to maintain contact with all of them, she instructed. We'll monitor their temperature remotely. If you feel uncomfortable or need a break, call us immediately. Jack nodded, adjusting his position slightly. The eggs felt cool against his skin, their surfaces smooth yet textured with minute scales. The keening had subsided, but he could feel subtle vibrations emanating from them, almost like purring. I'll stay as long as needed, he promised. As the scientists left to manage the cleanup and order replacement equipment, Jack found himself alone with the 5 Draconis eggs. The weight against his chest was strange, but not unpleasant. He thought of the countless nights he'd spent with infant Lily sleeping on his chest, her tiny heart beating against his. Hey there, little ones, he whispered to the eggs. I'm Jack. I've got a daughter who would love to meet you someday. Her name's Lily, and she's the bravest, smartest kid in the world. The eggs seemed to pulse in response to his voice. Jack continued talking, telling them stories about Lily, about Earth, about the stars and planets he'd seen during his years working in space. Hours passed, and gradually, he felt the eggs growing warmer against his skin. Dr. Williams returned periodically to check on them, her expression shifting from skeptical to amazed. It's working, she confirmed during her 3rd visit. Their core temperatures are stabilizing. The fracture on the first egg hasn't progressed further. Jack smiled, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. They like stories, he told her. I can feel them responding when I talk. Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. Interesting. The Draconis delegates mentioned that their young are taught through oral traditions even before hatching. Continue what you're doing. For the next 12 hours, Jack remained with the eggs. Station personnel brought him food and water, which he consumed carefully to avoid disturbing his precious charges. He dozed occasionally, but always maintained contact with the clutch. During his waking periods, he told the eggs about everything he could think of: his childhood on a farm in Nebraska, his time in the maintenance corps, meeting Lily's mother, the joy of becoming a father, and the deep ache of losing his wife to cancer. He spoke of things he rarely shared with anyone, finding strange comfort in confiding to these alien embryos. "Your parents must be worried sick about you," he murmured to the eggs sometime during the station's night cycle. "I know how that feels. Every day I'm away from Lily, I worry. Is she happy? Is she safe? Does she know how much I love her?" The eggs trembled against him, and Jack felt an unexpected sensation, a kind of pressure at the edges of his mind, like a question without words. "Yes," he answered instinctively. "Yes, I love her more than anything in this universe. More than my own life." The pressure intensified briefly, then receded, leaving behind a warm feeling that wasn't just physical. Somehow, he knew the unhatched Draconis had understood him. By morning, the eggs had warmed considerably. Dr. Reyes and her team returned, looking both relieved and perplexed. "Their vital signs have improved dramatically," Dr. Chen reported after scanning each egg. "The damaged one is actually showing signs of self-repair. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Reyes studied Jack with newfound respect. "The replacement incubators will arrive tomorrow. Think you can keep this up until then?" Jack nodded, adjusting the thermal blanket. "They're counting on me." As the day progressed, Jack noticed subtle changes in the eggs. The iridescent patterns on their surfaces shifted and flowed like liquid metal, and the pulses of inner light grew stronger. The one that had cracked now emitted a soft golden glow along the fracture line. During one of Dr. Williams' check-ins, Jack asked the question that had been brewing in his mind. What will happen to them when they hatch? Will they go back to their people? Dr. Williams hesitated. The plan was for them to hatch here, under observation. The diplomatic team would document the process as part of our xenobiological exchange. Then yes, they would be returned to the Draconis delegation. When will they hatch? That's uncertain. Our estimates suggested another 2 weeks, but she gestured to the glowing crack. Your intervention may have accelerated things. After she left, Jack returned to his one-sided conversation with the eggs. Hear that? You might be ahead of schedule. Lily was the same way. Came 3 weeks early, couldn't wait to see the world. The mental pressure returned, stronger this time, accompanied by distinct impressions, curiosity, warmth, and something that felt remarkably like gratitude. Jack gasped, realizing that the connection was growing stronger. The Draconis embryos were communicating with him. Can you understand me? He whispered. The response was immediate, a chorus of mental touches, each slightly different in tone and intensity. 5 distinct presences reaching out to him. Well, I'll be damned, Jack murmured. Wait until Lily hears about this. He spent the next several hours in silent communion with the unhatched Draconis, gradually learning to distinguish their individual mental voices. The one with the crack had the strongest presence, bold and inquisitive. Another felt cautious and methodical. The third radiated calm confidence, while the fourth projected a gentle empathy that reminded him painfully of his late wife. The fifth and smallest egg contained a playful spirit that immediately made him think of Lily. Jack named them in his mind. The bold one became Spark, the cautious one Scholar, the confident one Nova, the empathetic one Echo, and the playful one Whisper. He didn't know if these names would have any meaning to the Draconis, but it helped him connect with each embryo individually. As the station's night cycle began again, Jack found himself growing tired. He had been holding the eggs for nearly 24 hours, and despite his determination, his body demanded rest. His eyes grew heavy, and he drifted into a light sleep. In his dreams, he walked through a landscape unlike any on Earth. Vast crystalline structures rose toward a sky filled with 2 suns. The ground beneath his feet was warm and slightly yielding, like heated sand. Around him, massive shapes soared through the air, sinuous bodies covered in iridescent scales that caught the light and fractured it into rainbows. This is your world, Jack realized, understanding that the unhatched Draconis were sharing ancestral memories with him as he slept. The dream shifted, and Jack witnessed the catastrophe that had befallen the Draconis homeworld. A massive solar flare had disrupted their planet's magnetic field, causing temperature fluctuations that devastated their carefully maintained breeding grounds. He felt the collective grief of an ancient species facing extinction, the desperate hope placed in the few eggs that had been saved. Jack awoke with tears streaming down his face, his arms tightening protectively around the clutch of eggs. "I won't let you down," he promised them. "You're going to live and thrive. Your people will survive." The eggs pulsed in unison, their inner light briefly synchronizing in response to his words. Hours passed, and Jack's vigil continued. Station personnel came and went. Dr. Reyes informed him that the Draconis delegation had been notified of the incubator failure and his intervention. "They're extremely interested in meeting you," she told him. "This kind of cross-species bonding is unprecedented." Jack nodded, but his focus remained on the eggs. The crack in Spark's shell had widened slightly, and golden light now seeped steadily from it. The other eggs had developed similar glowing patterns across their surfaces, though none had yet cracked. "I think they're getting ready," he told Dr. Reyes. "Is that replacement incubator here yet?" "It arrived an hour ago. We're setting it up now." Jack felt an unexpected reluctance at the thought of relinquishing his charges. Over the past 36 hours, he had formed a bond with these unborn beings that transcended the physical warmth he provided. Through their mental connection, he had shared his life with them, and they had shared glimpses of theirs. "Can I stay with them?" he asked. "Even after they're in the incubator?" Dr. Reyes studied him thoughtfully. "The Draconis representatives have specifically requested that you remain involved. Apparently, this kind of imprinting is significant in their culture. You've become what they call a heart bond guardian, something usually reserved for their own kind." Relief washed over Jack. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Dr. Reyes said with a small smile. "You've potentially revolutionized interspecies diplomacy by following a hunch and offering a simple act of compassion. The politicians will be studying this case for decades." Jack chuckled. "I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong, Sullivan. Not everyone would have volunteered to cradle alien eggs against their chest for days on end. That requires a special kind of person." After Dr. Reyes left, Jack returned his attention to the eggs. "Hear that? I'm special," he joked. "Don't let it go to my head." The mental response from the clutch felt like laughter, bright and effervescent, tinged with genuine affection. Jack marveled at how quickly he had grown to care for these beings, how naturally he had fallen into the role of protector. Soon, technicians arrived with the new incubator, a sophisticated piece of equipment that hummed softly as it was wheeled into the lab. Dr. Williams supervised as Jack carefully transferred each egg into its cushioned compartment, maintaining physical contact until the last possible moment. "The temperature regulation is perfect," Dr. Williams assured him. "They'll be fine now." Despite her words, Jack felt a pang of loss as he broke physical contact with the eggs. The mental connection remained, but it felt more distant, like a conversation through a closed door rather than a face-to-face exchange. "I'll stay here," he decided, pulling up a chair next to the incubator. "Just in case." Dr. Williams nodded understandingly. "I'll have someone bring you a fresh uniform and some food." Left alone with the incubator, Jack placed his hand against its transparent cover. "I'm still here," he told the eggs. "I won't leave you." The mental acknowledgement was immediate and reassuring. The unhatched Draconis understood that though the physical contact had ended, the bond remained. Jack settled into his vigil, watching as the eggs continued their preparation for hatching. The glow from Spark's crack had intensified, and now the faintest hint of movement could be seen within, a shadow shifting behind translucent shell. "Take your time," Jack murmured. "The world will wait for you." But the world, it seemed, would not wait. Less than an hour later, Dr. Reyes burst into the lab, her face taut with tension. "The Draconis delegation has arrived early," she announced. "They're docking now." Jack straightened in his chair. I thought they weren't due for another day. Change of plans. When they heard about the incubator failure and your intervention, they accelerated their journey. Dr. Reyes ran a hand through her hair nervously. This is unprecedented. First contact was supposed to be handled by diplomats and xenobiologists with years of training, not a janitor. Jack finished with a wry smile. Dr. Reyes had the grace to look embarrassed. I didn't mean. It's fine, Jack assured her. I know my place. I'll make myself scarce once they arrive. No, Dr. Reyes said sharply. That's just it. They're asking for you specifically. You're to be present when they come aboard. Director Hoffman is having a meltdown about protocol, but the Draconis were quite insistent. Jack glanced at the incubator, where the 5 eggs continued their slow transformation. I can't leave them. You won't have to. The Draconis representatives will come here, to the lab. Before Jack could respond, his radio crackled. Sullivan, came Director Hoffman's clipped voice. Report to Docking Bay 3 immediately. Full uniform, freshly pressed. That's an order. Jack hesitated, torn between his duty to the station hierarchy and his promise to the unhatched Draconis. The eggs pulsed urgently, their mental voices projecting alarm at his conflicted thoughts. I have to go, he told them. But I'll be back soon, with your people. You won't be alone. The response was a reluctant acceptance, tinged with anxiety. Jack stood, accepting the fresh uniform Dr. Williams had brought earlier. Watch over them, he instructed her. If anything changes, anything at all, call me immediately. Dr. Williams nodded solemnly. They'll be fine for a few minutes. Go meet our guests. Jack changed quickly in the adjacent bathroom, straightened his uniform, and made his way to the docking bay. His mind was still partially connected to the clutch, their presences lingering at the edges of his consciousness like a comforting background hum. Docking Bay 3 was a flurry of activity. Station security stood at attention, while diplomatic personnel fussed with tablets and straightened their formal attire. Director Hoffman, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and a perpetual frown, spotted Jack as he entered. Sullivan, stand over there, she ordered, pointing to a spot near the airlock. Speak only when spoken to. Remember that you represent not just this station, but all of humanity. Yes, ma'am, Jack replied, taking his position. The docking bay fell silent as the airlock cycled. Jack stood straight, his janitor's uniform freshly pressed but still marked with the station's maintenance division patch, a simple emblem showing cross tools beneath the station's designation. He felt distinctly out of place among the diplomatic corps with their polished appearance and practiced smiles. The airlock door slid open, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows beyond. Jack's first impression was of fluid grace. The Draconis representative moved with a sinuous elegance that made human movement seem clumsy by comparison. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, the being had a humanoid upper body that tapered into a more serpentine lower half. Iridescent scales covered its form, shifting colors with each movement, predominantly deep azure with accents of gold and emerald green. But it was the face that captured Jack's attention. Distinctly reptilian, with an elongated snout and prominent crest, yet the eyes, large, multifaceted, and brilliantly golden, held an unmistakable intelligence and emotional depth that transcended species barriers. Behind the first Draconis came 2 others, similar in appearance, but with subtle variations in coloration and crest structure. They moved in perfect coordination, their expressions unreadable to human eyes. Director Hoffman stepped forward, hand raised in the greeting gesture that had been established during preliminary communications. On behalf of Earth and the United Systems Alliance, I welcome you to Maintenance Station Epsilon 9. I am Director Valerie Hoffman. The lead Draconis returned the gesture, its movements precise and deliberate. When it spoke, the words came through a translation device worn at its throat. I am Thalen, first speaker of the Draconis Conclave. These are Marin and Kareth, guardians of the royal clutch. The translator rendered the voice as vaguely feminine, with a musical quality that seemed fitting for the elegant being. Phelan's multifaceted eyes scanned the assembled humans, then fixed unerringly on Jack. You, the translator conveyed. You are the one who sheltered our young with your own body heat. Step forward. Director Hoffman's face tightened, but she nodded almost imperceptibly to Jack, who stepped forward with a mixture of nervousness and resolve. My name is Jack Sullivan, ma'am. Station maintenance. Phelan approached him, moving with that same fluid grace. She stopped mere inches away, towering over Jack, and lowered her head until their eyes were level. Her pupils contracted and expanded, the golden irises seeming to glow from within. Heartbond Guardian, she said, the translator unable to fully capture the reverence in the original sound. You have done what none of your kind have done before. You have touched the minds of unhatched Draconis and been accepted. Jack swallowed. They were in trouble. I just did what needed doing. Phelan made a sound that the translator didn't attempt to interpret, something between a purr and a musical note. Modesty. Another trait we share with humans, it seems. She turned to her companions. This is the one the clutch has chosen. The other Draconis moved forward, studying Jack with equal intensity. Marin, distinguished by scales of deeper blue, spoke next. The young ones speak of you. Even now, across this distance, they reach for your mind. His translator rendered his voice as masculine and deeper than Phelan's. This is unprecedented. In all our history, no outsider has formed such a bond. Jack shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. I should get back to them. One of the eggs, the one I call Spark, has a crack that's growing. The three Draconis exchanged looks of surprise. You have named them? Kareth asked, her scales flashing crimson briefly. Not officially, Jack clarified quickly. Just in my mind. To tell them apart. Names have power, Phelan said solemnly. That you could distinguish their individual essences before hatching speaks to the depth of your connection. She turned to Director Hoffman. We must proceed to the clutch immediately. As the group moved through the station's corridors toward the lab, Jack felt the mental connection with the eggs growing stronger with each step closer. Their excitement and anxiety mingled with his own, creating a feedback loop of emotion that was almost overwhelming. They know you're coming, he told Phelan. They're excited. Phelan's eyes widened. You maintain contact even now? Without physical proximity. Jack nodded. Ever since I held them. It's like they're always there, in the back of my mind. Extraordinary, Marin murmured. Even among our kind, such distant communion with the unhatched is rare. They reached the lab, where Dr. Reyes and her team waited nervously beside the incubator. The eggs were visibly active now, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that shifted and flowed like liquid starlight. Phelan approached the incubator reverently, placing a six-fingered hand against its transparent surface. My children, she whispered, the translator barely catching the words. Jack blinked in surprise. They're yours? You're their mother? Phelan turned to him, her expression softening. I am. The royal bloodline continues only through my clutch now. When the solar event devastated our breeding grounds, many eggs were lost. These 5 are the future of our ruling house, and perhaps our species. Understanding dawned on Jack. Not just any eggs, but royal offspring. No wonder the diplomatic mission was so important. He looked at the incubator with renewed appreciation for the trust the Draconis had placed in humanity. I didn't know, he said quietly. I would have. You would have done exactly as you did, Phelan interrupted. With compassion and without hesitation. That is why the young ones have chosen you. Before Jack could ask what she meant, a sharp crack echoed through the lab. All eyes turned to the incubator, where Spark's egg was now split by a jagged line of golden light. The shell bulged outward as something pushed from within. It's happening, Dr. Williams breathed. They're hatching. Phelan made a trilling sound of joy that needed no translation. Marin and Kareth moved to flank her, their postures alert and protective. Open the incubator, Phelan commanded. They must feel their mother's touch as they emerge. Dr. Reyes hesitated, looking to Director Hoffman, who nodded tersely. The xenobiologist carefully opened the incubator's top panel, allowing Phelan to reach inside. The Draconis leader gently touched each egg, crooning in her native language. Sounds too complex for the translator to process. To Jack's surprise, Thalen then turned to him. Join me, Heartbond Guardian. They call for you as well. Jack looked uncertainly at Director Hoffman, who seemed about to object, then thought better of it and nodded her permission. He stepped forward and, at Thalen's gesture, placed his hands alongside hers on the clutch of eggs. The moment of contact sent a surge of emotion through the mental link, joy, recognition, and impatience from the unhatched Draconis. Jack laughed aloud at their enthusiasm. Easy there, he told them. Hatching is serious business. Take your time. Spark's egg continued to crack, the fissure widening until a small, clawed hand pushed through. The tiny appendage was covered in scales that shimmered with the same iridescent quality as Thalen's, though predominantly gold rather than blue. The firstborn, Thalen said proudly. Strong and determined. Together, Jack and Thalen watched as Spark struggled free of the confining shell, emerging piece by piece into the world. First the hand, then a head with eyes still sealed shut, followed by shoulders, torso, and finally a long, sinuous tail. The hatchling was about the size of a human infant, but proportioned like a miniature version of the adult Draconis. Wet and trembling, Spark curled instinctively toward the nearest source of warmth, Jack's hand. Tiny claws wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. Hello there, Jack whispered, feeling a rush of protectiveness that matched anything he'd felt for Lily. Welcome to the world. Spark's eyes opened for the first time, golden, like Thalen's, but with flecks of green that caught the light. The hatchling looked directly at Jack, and the mental connection between them solidified into something unbreakable. Recognition, trust, belonging. The emotions flowed both ways, and Jack understood with sudden clarity why Thalen had called him a Heartbond Guardian. This wasn't just a temporary connection. Somehow, he had become irrevocably linked to these young beings. What happens now? He asked Thalen softly as Spark nuzzled against his palm. The Draconis leader regarded him with an expression that seemed almost tender. Now, Jack Sullivan, you become part of our family. The heart bond cannot be broken, nor would we wish it to be. You have given our children life, and in doing so, have tied your fate to theirs. As if in response to her words, the remaining eggs began to crack in rapid succession. Scholar, Nova, Echo, and Whisper emerged into the world, each immediately seeking contact with both Thalen and Jack, forming a circle of connected beings that transcended species and space. In that moment, surrounded by newborn Draconis hatchlings and their grateful mother, Jack Sullivan, maintenance worker, widower, father, and now Heartbond Guardian, felt a sense of purpose and belonging that had eluded him since his wife's death. Wait until Lily hears about this, he said, cradling Whisper as the smallest hatchling chirped softly against his chest. She always wanted a dragon. Thalen's eyes crinkled in what Jack now recognized as the Draconis equivalent of a smile. Then perhaps it is time for your daughter to meet her new siblings. And as the hatchlings curled trustingly in his arms, their minds linked with his in a bond that would last a lifetime, Jack knew that the universe had just become a much more magical place. For him, for Lily, and for the future of two species now connected by the simple act of holding something precious close to one's heart. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. The entire station buzzed with news of the Draconis hatchlings and the unprecedented bond they had formed with a human janitor. Jack found himself at the center of attention, a position that made him deeply uncomfortable. I'm just a maintenance guy, he protested when Dr. Reyes suggested he participate in a formal documentation of the hatching process. Shouldn't you scientists be handling this? That's exactly why we need you, she explained. You've connected with them in a way none of us can. The hatchlings respond to you differently. This was undeniably true. While the young Draconis recognized Thalen as their mother and primary caregiver, they sought Jack out constantly, their mental voices calling to him across the station whenever they were separated for too long. Director Hoffman had reluctantly assigned Jack to special diplomatic duty, relieving him of his regular maintenance responsibilities. Now he spent his days in the newly established nursery adjacent to the xenobiology lab, helping Thalen and her assistants care for the 5 rapidly growing hatchlings. They develop much faster than human infants, Thalen explained as they watched Spark attempting to climb the wall of the nursery enclosure. Just 3 days old, the hatchling already showed remarkable coordination and problem-solving abilities. By your Earth month, they will be speaking. By 6 months, they will have reached adolescence. That's incredible, Jack said, gently guiding Spark back down. Lily didn't even crawl until she was 8 months old. The mental link allowed Jack to understand the hatchlings' needs almost before they expressed them. He knew when they were hungry, uncomfortable, or curious about some new aspect of their environment. Similarly, they absorbed his thoughts and emotions with an uncanny awareness that sometimes left him feeling strangely exposed. "Do they always read minds like this?" he asked Thalen during a quiet moment. The Draconis leader tilted her head thoughtfully. "The connection is not precisely mind-reading as you understand it. It is more an empathic resonance, deepened by the circumstances of their hatching. Because you sheltered them during their most vulnerable period, they imprinted on your emotional signature. They recognize you as kin. So I'm like their second parent? In our culture, we have a term that translates roughly to heart guardian. It describes one who shelters the vulnerable with their own life force. It is a sacred role, traditionally held by the closest blood relatives of the clutch bearer." Thalen's expression softened. That you, an alien being, could fulfill this role is something our historians will study for generations. Jack watched as Whisper, the smallest of the hatchlings, curled up for a nap in a warm patch of sunlight created by the station's artificial lighting. "What happens when you take them home? Will this connection fade?" Thalen was quiet for a long moment. "That is a matter we must discuss, Jack Sullivan. The heart bond you share with these young ones is not temporary. Distance may attenuate it somewhat, but never break it completely. If the separation is too great or too sudden, it could cause them significant distress during this crucial developmental period." The implication hung in the air between them. Jack felt his stomach tighten. "You're saying I would need to go with you? To your world? Or they would need to remain with you, at least partially, as they mature?" Thalen's golden eyes studied him with compassion. "I understand you have a young one of your own. This complicates matters." Jack's thoughts immediately flew to Lily. His contract with the station had another 4 months before his scheduled return to Earth. 4 months away from his daughter, who already had to cope with losing her mother. How could he extend that separation? But equally, how could he abandon these 5 beings who had literally entrusted him with their lives? "I need to talk to Lily," he said finally. "Can we arrange a communication?" Thalen nodded. "Of course. The Draconis delegation has brought more advanced communication technology than your station possesses. We can establish a real-time link with Earth, despite the distance." 2 hours later, Jack sat nervously in the station's communication center, now augmented with sleek Draconis equipment. The screen before him flickered, then resolved into the familiar face of his 8-year-old daughter. Lily's brown eyes widened at the sight of him. "Daddy, you're calling early. Is everything okay?" Jack felt his heart constrict. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually. I have some incredible news, and I wanted to share it with you right away." Over the next several minutes, he explained, in terms an 8-year-old could understand, about the Draconis eggs, the incubator failure, and his role in saving them. Lily listened with growing excitement, her eyes growing wider with each new detail. "Real dragons? And you saved them?" Her voice rose with wonder. "That's the coolest thing ever. Are they cute? Do they breathe fire? Can I see them?" Jack chuckled. "They don't breathe fire, but they are pretty amazing. And yes, you can see them." He glanced over his shoulder at Thalen, who stood just out of view of the camera. At her nod, he continued, "In fact, how would you like to meet them in person?" Lily's squeal of delight was so loud that Jack had to lower the volume. "Really? I can come to space?" "Well, not exactly." Jack took a deep breath. "The dragons, the Draconis, have invited us to visit their world. Both of us, together. It would be a special mission, very important for both humans and Draconis. Lily's expression grew serious, showing a maturity beyond her years. For how long? Would I miss school? It would be for about a year, Jack admitted. But you wouldn't fall behind. The Draconis have amazing teachers, and they've offered to provide you with education that would put you years ahead of your classmates when we return. A whole year on a dragon planet. Lily considered this, her small face scrunched in concentration. Would Aunt Sarah be sad if I left? I've already spoken with her, Jack assured her, though the conversation with his sister had been far more complex than he was letting on. She understands how important this is. In truth, Sarah had been skeptical, bordering on hostile, until Director Hoffman had personally called to explain the diplomatic significance of the situation. The words historical importance and intergalactic relations had eventually won her over, though she remained concerned about Lily's well-being. Will I get my own dragon? Lily asked, her practical side asserting itself. Jack smiled. Something even better. These 5 young Draconis have formed a special bond with me, with us. They're like family now. You'll be the first human child to grow up alongside Draconis young. On cue, Whisper poked a curious head into view of the camera. The hatchling had been mentally eavesdropping on the conversation and couldn't contain its curiosity any longer. Lily gasped as the small, iridescent face appeared next to her father's. Is that one? It's so pretty. Whisper preened at the compliment, the scales around its crest flaring with pleasure. Through their mental link, Jack felt the hatchling's immediate affinity for Lily, a recognition of kindred playful spirits. This is Whisper, Jack introduced. The smallest, but maybe the smartest of the 5. Whisper chirped, a sound somewhere between a bird's call and a purr. Lily giggled in delight. I want to come now. When can we leave? The rest of the conversation was a whirlwind of excited questions and hasty plans. By the time they said goodbye, with promises to speak again the next day, Jack felt both drained and exhilarated. He turned to Thalen, who had observed the exchange with interest. She's on board, he said unnecessarily. Thalen inclined her head. Your offspring shows remarkable adaptability and courage. These are traits valued highly among the Draconis. She gets that from her mother, Jack said softly. Over the next 2 weeks, preparations accelerated. The diplomatic talks between humans and Draconis expanded to include a formal cultural exchange program, with Jack and Lily as the first human participants. Director Hoffman, recognizing the political significance, fast-tracked the necessary approvals from Earth authorities. You're being appointed as an official human ambassador to the Draconis Conclave, she informed Jack during a private meeting. With full diplomatic credentials and a substantial stipend. Jack stared at her in disbelief. I'm a janitor. Not anymore. Hoffman's usually stern face softened slightly. Sullivan, what you did was extraordinary. You acted on instinct and compassion, and in doing so, you've opened doors between our species that might have taken decades to negotiate otherwise. The Draconis trust you implicitly because of your bond with their royal offspring. We'd be fools not to capitalize on that. Meanwhile, the hatchlings continued to grow at an astonishing rate. By the end of the 2nd week, all 5 had doubled in size and begun to vocalize in ways that approximated speech. Their mental communications became more complex, shifting from pure emotion and imagery to rudimentary concepts and questions. Spark, true to the name Jack had given him, was the most adventurous, constantly testing boundaries and exploring every corner of the nursery. Scholar was quieter but observant, often watching the station's scientists at work with unnerving intensity. Nova projected an air of natural authority, already showing signs of her royal heritage. Echo remained the most empathetic, often serving as mediator when the others squabbled. And Whisper, the smallest, compensated with mischievous intelligence and an uncanny ability to squeeze into spaces the others couldn't reach. They're like normal kids in so many ways, Jack commented to Dr. Williams as they watched the hatchlings engage in what appeared to be a game of tag. But then they do something that reminds you they're completely alien. Dr. Williams nodded. Their cognitive development is fascinating. They're processing and categorizing information at rates that would be impossible for human children. And yet, they play and squabble just like Earth youngsters. Through it all, the mental bond between Jack and the hatchlings deepened. He found himself increasingly able to distinguish their individual voices and personalities, even when they were out of sight. They, in turn, absorbed human concepts and language at an incredible pace, learning as much from Jack's thoughts as from his words. 3 weeks after the hatching, Lily arrived at the station aboard a special transport. Jack waited anxiously at the docking bay, both excited to see his daughter and nervous about how she would adjust to the realities of space travel and alien contact. When the airlock door opened, Lily burst through like a small whirlwind, launching herself into her father's arms. "Daddy, I'm in space. I saw Earth from the window, and it was so small." Jack hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I missed you so much, Pumpkin." "I missed you too." Lily pulled back to look at him seriously. "But now we're going on an adventure with dragons, so it's okay." Jack laughed. "Yes, we are. And they can't wait to meet you." He had deliberately kept the young Draconis away from the docking bay, wanting Lily to have time to adjust before meeting them. But through the mental link, he could feel their impatience and curiosity building to nearly unbearable levels. "They're very excited," he thought toward them. "Just a little longer." The response was a chorus of mental grumbles and anticipation. Whisper, in particular, was practically bouncing with eagerness to meet the human child they had seen on the view screen. As Jack led Lily through the station, he was struck by how small and vulnerable she looked in the industrial environment of Epsilon 9. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he making the right decision, taking his young daughter to an alien world? What would Kate have said about this plan? As if sensing his uncertainty, Lily squeezed his hand. "Is something wrong, Daddy?" Jack shook his head. "Just thinking about what a big adventure we're starting." "Mom would think it's awesome," Lily said with the simple confidence of childhood. "She always said we should explore everything we can." Jack felt his throat tighten. Kate had indeed been the adventurous one in their relationship, always pushing for new experiences. "You're right, she would have loved this." When they reached the nursery, Jack knelt to Lily's level. "Remember what I told you about the bond one have with the hatchlings? They might try to connect with you too. It feels like someone gently knocking on a door in your mind. It won't hurt, but it might feel strange at first." Lily nodded solemnly. "I'm ready." Jack opened the door, and they stepped into the nursery together. The 5 young Draconis were waiting, arrayed in a semicircle with Thalen standing protectively behind them. They had been coached on the proper protocol for meeting a human child, but their excitement was palpable, manifesting as rippling colors across their scales. Lily stopped, her eyes wide with wonder. "They're beautiful," she whispered. The hatchlings preened collectively, their crests rising in pleasure at the compliment. Then, unable to contain themselves any longer, they surged forward as one. Jack felt a moment of alarm. They were still learning to control their strength, but the young Draconis moved with surprising gentleness as they surrounded Lily, chirping and trilling in greeting. Whisper, predictably, was the boldest, reaching out to touch Lily's hand with a delicate claw. The moment of contact created a flash of connection that Jack felt through his own bond. Surprise, delight, and immediate recognition flowed between the human child and the Draconis hatchling. "They're talking in my head," Lily exclaimed, her face lighting up with joy. "It tickles." The mental communication was simpler than what Jack experienced, more like shared emotions and simple images than complex thoughts, but it was unmistakably real. Somehow, Lily had been accepted into the bond almost instantly. Thalen stepped forward, her expression one of amazement. "This is unprecedented," she said softly. "The heart bond is rarely extended beyond the original guardian. Your daughter must share your empathic resonance." Jack watched as Lily giggled, already playing some wordless game with the hatchlings. "She's her mother's daughter," he said simply, open-hearted and fearless. The next few days were a whirlwind of final preparations. The Draconis vessel that would transport them to the alien homeworld was being readied, supplies were being loaded, and last-minute diplomatic protocols were being established. Throughout it all, Lily and the Hatchlings became inseparable. They played elaborate games through the station corridors, communicating in a mixture of spoken words, mental images, and the unique trilling language of young Draconis. Station personnel grew accustomed to the sight of a small human girl followed by 5 increasingly less small reptilian beings, all moving with the coordinated chaos of childhood. "She's good for them," Thalen observed as they watched Lily teaching the hatchlings a human game involving hopping patterns drawn on the floor. "Your daughter brings a spontaneity that our young ones sometimes lack. Our education tends to emphasize discipline and tradition from an early age." "And they're good for her," Jack replied. "She lost her mother 3 years ago. I've done my best, but there's been a loneliness in her that I couldn't fix." He paused, watching as Lily demonstrated a particularly complicated hop to an attentive whisper. "I haven't seen her this happy in a long time." The day of departure arrived with little fanfare. The diplomatic negotiations had been concluded successfully, with agreements for ongoing cultural and scientific exchange between humans and Draconis. Jack and Lily's role as ambassadors had been formalized, with a 2-year assignment that could be extended by mutual agreement. As they prepared to board the Draconis vessel, Director Hoffman approached Jack for a final word. "Sullivan," she began stiffly, then seemed to reconsider her formal tone. "Jack, what you've accomplished here is remarkable. You've changed the course of interspecies relations through a simple act of compassion." Jack shrugged uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Hoffman said firmly. "They wouldn't have. That's precisely the point. Your instinct was to help, to protect, without calculation or hesitation. The Draconis value that quality above almost all others. It's why they trust you with their royal offspring." She extended her hand, which Jack shook awkwardly. "Good luck, Ambassador Sullivan. Represent us well." The Draconis ship was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Organic curves blended seamlessly with advanced technology, creating an interior that felt more like a living organism than a mechanical vessel. Their quarters were spacious and comfortable, with modifications to accommodate human needs. As the ship detached from the station and began its journey toward the Draconis homeworld, Jack stood with Lily at a viewing port, watching as Epsilon 9 dwindled to a small point of light against the vast backdrop of space. "Are you scared, Daddy?" Lily asked, pressing her small hand against the transparent material. Jack considered the question honestly. "A little," he admitted. "But sometimes the best adventures start with being a little scared." Lily nodded wisely. "Like when I learned to swim. I was scared, but then it was fun." Exactly like that. The journey to the Draconis homeworld would take nearly 3 weeks, even with the advanced propulsion systems of the alien vessel. During this time, Jack and Lily settled into a routine with Thalen and the Hatchlings, learning more about Draconis culture, language, and history. The young Draconis continued to grow at an astonishing rate. By the second week of the journey, they had nearly tripled in size from when they first hatched, and their vocalizations had begun to coalesce into recognizable speech patterns. They mixed Draconis language with English words picked up from Jack and Lily, creating a unique hybrid that the adults sometimes struggled to follow. "Heartfather," Spark called one day, using the term they had collectively decided upon for Jack. "Show again how humans play?" Jack looked up from the cultural briefing he had been studying. "What kind of play do you want to see, Spark?" The young Draconis' crest rippled with excitement. "The one with hands and counting. Lily showed yesterday. Rock, paper, scissors?" Jack clarified, setting aside his tablet. "Yes, rock crushes scissors." Spark demonstrated with exaggerated motions of his increasingly dexterous claws. Jack spent the next hour teaching the game to all 5 hatchlings, who approached it with the same intense focus they brought to everything new. They were particularly fascinated by the conceptual nature of the game, how a simple hand shape could represent a complex object. In Draconis culture, representation is primarily mental, Thalen explained as she observed the lesson. "We share images directly through communal thought bonds. The idea of physical symbols standing in for objects is less intuitive for our young. These cultural differences revealed themselves in countless small ways throughout the journey. The Draconis approach to time, space, family, and learning often diverged significantly from human norms, yet Jack was struck by how many commonalities existed beneath the surface differences. Your species values family bonds as we do, Phelan noted during one of their evening discussions. You protect your young, educate them, prepare them for independence. The methods differ, but the essence is the same. Halfway through the journey, the ship received a transmission from the Draconis homeworld, urgent news that Phelan received privately before calling Jack to a meeting in the ship's communication center. There has been a development, she said, her usual calm demeanor underscored by tension. The environmental degradation on our world has accelerated. The solar event that damaged our breeding grounds has triggered a cascade of atmospheric changes that our scientists did not anticipate. Jack felt a chill of apprehension. What does that mean for your people? Phelan's scales darkened slightly, a sign of distress, Jack had learned. It means that within one generation, our world may become uninhabitable. The royal clutch you saved, these 5 young ones, they may be among the last Draconis born on our ancestral planet. The gravity of the situation sank in. Jack thought of the vibrant, intelligent beings who had entrusted him with their children's lives. There must be something that can be done. Our scientists are exploring solutions, but time is against us. Phelan's multifaceted eyes fixed on Jack. This is why the alliance with humanity has become even more crucial. Your species has experience with environmental adaptation and terraforming technology that might benefit our efforts. Jack frowned, thinking of Earth's own troubled environmental history. We've made plenty of mistakes with our planet, and learned from them, Phelan countered. Knowledge born of failure is often the most valuable. Additionally, we are investigating potential colony worlds that might support both our species. The diplomatic mission you have joined is taken on new urgency. That night, as Lily slept peacefully in their shared quarters, Jack sat awake, contemplating the enormous responsibility that had fallen to him through a simple act of holding alien eggs to his chest. He had gone from maintenance worker to potential participant in saving an entire species. The young Draconis, sensing his turmoil, sent soothing mental reassurances. They didn't fully understand the situation. Phelan had shielded them from the worst of it, but they felt his concern and responded with absolute trust that he would help make things right. Jack's thoughts turned to Lily. What kind of future was he building for her? Was he placing too heavy a burden on her young shoulders? Or was he giving her the opportunity to be part of something truly meaningful? When the Draconis homeworld finally came into view, Jack and Lily joined Phelan and the hatchlings at the ship's main viewing portal. The planet below them was breathtaking. Swirling clouds and shades of amber and gold partially obscured a landscape of crystalline mountains and vast, shimmering plains. Candaria, Phelan said softly, using the Draconis name for their world. Home. The young Draconis pressed against the viewport, their scales shimmering with excitement as they beheld their ancestral planet for the first time. Through the mental link, Jack felt their complex emotions, recognition of a place they had never physically seen, inherited memory mixing with present perception. It's beautiful, Lily whispered, her hand finding Jack's and squeezing tightly. The ship descended through the golden clouds, emerging above a vast metropolis unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Structures of crystal and living material rose in graceful spirals and arches, connected by networks of shimmering pathways. The architecture seemed to merge seamlessly with the natural landscape, as if the city had grown rather than been built. They landed on a platform adjacent to what Phelan identified as the Conclave Hall, the center of Draconis governance. A delegation waited to receive them, including officials in ceremonial garments and a group of scientists identifiable by their distinctive insignia. The welcoming will be formal, Phelan warned Jack and Lily as they prepared to disembark. The Conclave elders place great importance on traditional protocols, especially in times of crisis. Jack straightened his diplomatic uniform, a specially designed outfit that incorporated both human and Draconis elements. Lily, dressed similarly, bounced on her toes with barely contained excitement. "Remember what we practiced," Jack reminded her gently. "Bow from the shoulders, not the waist, and wait for the elder to touch your forehead before speaking." "I know, Daddy," Lily said with the impatience of a child who had rehearsed something many times. "And I say, I bring greetings from Earth to Kindaria in Draconis." Jack smiled, still amazed at how quickly she had picked up the alien language. The mental connection with the young Draconis had accelerated her learning far beyond what would normally be possible. The reception was every bit as formal as Thalen had warned. The conclave elders, 7 ancient Draconis whose scales had faded to pale silver with age, performed a ceremonial greeting that lasted nearly an hour. Throughout it all, Lily maintained perfect composure, reciting her practiced phrases flawlessly and showing respect according to Draconis custom. The hatchlings, too, behaved with surprising decorum, taking their places beside Thalen in the formation traditional for royal offspring. Only through the mental link could Jack detect their simmering impatience and the effort it cost them to remain still. When the ceremony concluded, the eldest of the conclave approached Jack directly. Elder Vrath was impossibly old by human standards. Thalen had mentioned he had seen over 3 centuries pass. His movements were slow but deliberate, his golden eyes clouded but still keen. "Heart guardian of the royal clutch," he addressed Jack, his translator rendering his voice as deep and resonant. "You have done our people a service that cannot be measured. The conclave acknowledges this debt and welcomes you as kin." Jack bowed respectfully. "The honor was mine, Elder Vrath. I did only what any father would do." The ancient Draconis made a sound that the translator interpreted as a chuckle. "And that, human Jack Sullivan, is precisely why you were able to form the heart bond where others might have failed. Your instinct to protect transcended species barriers. Such capacity for connection gives us hope for the future of both our peoples." The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and cultural exchanges. Jack found himself in conference with Draconis scientists, explaining human approaches to environmental challenges and listening to their proposed solutions for their dying world. Lily, meanwhile, began her education alongside the young Draconis, enrolled in what Thalen called a creche school, an institution that combined elements of family nurturing with formal learning. Through their mental connection, Jack could sense how quickly she was adapting, absorbing new concepts and making friends among the Draconis children. 2 weeks into their stay, Jack was summoned to a private meeting with the Science Conclave, the group of Draconis researchers responsible for addressing the environmental crisis. "We have been analyzing the data you provided regarding Earth's atmospheric correction technologies," Chief Scientist Marin, whom Jack now knew was Thalen's clutch sibling, began. "Combined with our own research, we believe we have identified a potential solution, but it will require cooperation on an unprecedented scale." The plan they outlined was ambitious, a network of atmospheric regulators based on both human and Draconis technology, deployed strategically across Kindaria. These devices would gradually stabilize the atmosphere, reversing the damage caused by the solar event. However, the resources required would strain both species' capabilities. The alternative, Elder Vrath stated from his position at the head of the table, is evacuation. "We have identified 3 potential worlds that might support Draconis life, but colonization would mean abandoning thousands of years of history and culture. It is not a choice we make lightly." Jack studied the projections hovering in the air before him. "If I understand correctly, even with the atmospheric regulators, Kindaria won't be fully stabilized for at least a generation?" "Correct," Marin confirmed. "The young ones, including the royal clutch, will see their world heal, but there will be difficult years ahead." Jack thought of the 5 hatchlings who had become as dear to him as his own daughter. "Then we need both solutions. Start the atmospheric restoration, but also prepare for partial evacuation, especially of the young and those most vulnerable to the changing conditions." The meeting continued late into the night, with Jack drawing on everything he had learned during his years in space station maintenance. Environmental systems were environmental systems. Whether on a station or a planet, the principles remained similar, even if the scale differed dramatically. When he finally returned to the dwelling assigned to him and Lily, he found his daughter curled up asleep, surrounded by the 5 young Draconis who had refused to leave her side. The sight brought a lump to his throat, these beings from different worlds, finding comfort in each other's presence. Over the next 6 months, Jack watched with pride as Lily flourished in her new environment. She learned the Draconis language with near-native fluency, mastered their complex social customs, and formed deep friendships not only with the royal hatchlings, but with other young Draconis as well. Through it all, she maintained a distinctly human perspective that often provided fresh insights to their hosts. "Why don't you just put big sunshades in space?" she asked during a family dinner, after listening to the adults discuss the atmospheric problems. "Like the umbrellas we use at the beach on Earth." The Draconis scientists initially dismissed the idea as childishly simple, until they ran the calculations and discovered that a network of orbital shade structures could indeed supplement the atmospheric regulators, providing immediate relief while the longer-term solutions took effect. From the mouths of younglings, Thalen said with approval, her scales shimmering with the Draconis equivalent of a proud smile. The young Draconis continued their remarkable growth. By the 6-month mark, they had reached the equivalent of human pre-adolescence, though their physical development outpaced their emotional maturity in some respects. They stood nearly as tall as Lily now, their once tiny forms having stretched and filled out into the beginnings of the elegant adult shape. Their personalities, too, had developed along the lines Jack had first observed. Spark remained the adventurous leader, often the first to try new experiences. Scholar had become deeply immersed in both Draconis and human knowledge, often surprising the adults with the connections he drew between disparate fields. Nova displayed natural diplomatic skills, mediating disputes among her clutch siblings and other young Draconis. Echo showed remarkable artistic talent, creating music that blended human melodies with Draconis harmonics. And Whisper, still the smallest, compensated with quick wit and an uncanny ability to solve problems that stumped the others. Through it all, the heart bond remained, evolving as they grew. What had begun as a simple empathic connection deepened into something more complex, a shared understanding that transcended language and species barriers. Jack could still sense their emotions and basic thoughts, but now there was a greater respect for privacy, a mutual agreement about the boundaries of the mental link. 9 months into their stay on Candaria, the first atmospheric regulator came online. Jack stood with Thalen, Lily, and the young Draconis on a viewing platform as the massive device began its work, sending pulses of energy into the golden clouds above. "Will it fix everything?" Lily asked, watching the energy patterns ripple across the sky. "Not everything," Thalen answered honestly, "but it is a beginning. Sometimes that is all we can ask for, a chance to begin again, to correct past mistakes." Jack thought about how far they had come from that moment in Lab 7 when he had first offered to hold the freezing eggs against his heart. A simple act of compassion had led to this moment, humans and Draconis working together to save a world. "The best solutions often start with the simplest actions," he said, placing one arm around Lily and extending his other hand to the 5 young Draconis, who pressed close in their familiar formation. One person deciding to help, then another, then another. As the energy patterns above them formed intricate, beautiful configurations against the amber sky, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. The path ahead would not be easy. There were still countless challenges to overcome, diplomatic complexities to navigate, and technological hurdles to surmount. But in this moment, surrounded by his expanded family of humans and Draconis, he knew with absolute certainty that they would face those challenges together. The young Draconis sent waves of agreement through the mental link, their confidence and determination bolstering his own. Lily leaned against him, her small hand finding his and squeezing tight. "We're going to save their world, aren't we, Daddy?" she whispered. Jack looked down at his daughter. This remarkable child who had adapted to an alien world with such courage and grace, and then at the 5 young Draconis who had become as much his children as she was. In their eyes, both human and alien, he saw the same thing. Hope for a future that neither species could build alone, but that together seemed suddenly, wonderfully possible. Yes, he promised them all. Together, we will. 1 year later, Jack stood on the same viewing platform, watching as the now familiar energy patterns danced across a sky that had begun to show hints of blue among the amber clouds. The atmospheric restoration was proceeding faster than initially projected, thanks to the combined efforts of human and Draconis scientists. Beside him, Lily, now 9 years old and nearly fluent in 3 Draconis dialects, pointed excitedly at a particular formation. "Look, Dad, that's the new pattern Echo designed." Jack smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. In the year they had spent on Candaria, Lily had grown not just in height, but in confidence and understanding. Her natural empathy had made her a bridge between cultures in ways that adult diplomats could only envy. The 5 young Draconis, now approaching their full adolescent growth, had taken on formal roles within their society while maintaining their close bond with the Sullivans. Spark was training with the Planetary Defense Forces, his natural leadership qualities already marking him for future command. Scholar had been accepted into the Science Conclave as a junior researcher, focusing on the Environmental Restoration Project. Nova was apprenticed to the Diplomatic Corps, accompanying Elder Draconis on missions to potential colony worlds. Echo had become something of a cultural icon, her art forms blending human and Draconis aesthetics in ways that captivated both species. And Whisper, still the smallest, but perhaps the most insightful, had found a niche in the educational system, helping to develop new teaching methods that incorporated the best of both worlds. "Heartfather," called a familiar voice. Jack turned to see Thalen approaching, her scales gleaming in the mixed light of Candaria's twin sons. In the years since their arrival, she had become more than just an ally. She was family. "The Council has reached a decision," Thalen announced, her voice carrying a note of solemnity. "The atmospheric restoration is proceeding well enough that we can focus our resources on healing this world rather than abandoning it." Jack felt relief wash over him. "That's wonderful news. It would not have been possible without you," Thalen said. A simple janitor who held dying hatchlings to his heart changed the fate of an entire species. As if summoned by their conversation, the 5 young Draconis joined them on the platform, their adolescent forms now elegant and powerful. Through their bond, Jack felt their collective joy and pride. "We have another announcement," Nova said, her diplomatic training evident in her measured tone. "The Council has approved the establishment of a permanent human Draconis academy here on Candaria, with a sister campus to be built on Earth. And they want you to lead it, Dad," Lily added excitedly. "Both of us, actually." Jack looked at his expanded family in amazement. "Are you serious?" "Most serious," Scholar confirmed. "Who better to guide the next generation of both our species than those who first bridged the gap between our worlds?" Echo stepped forward, her scales shimmering with emotion. "The Academy will teach both our peoples how to understand each other, just as you taught us." And, Whisper added with characteristic mischief, "It means we don't have to say goodbye when your 2-year mission ends." Spark, now tall and strong, placed a clawed hand on Jack's shoulder. "You saved us when we were nothing but eggs. Now we help save both our worlds, together." Jack felt tears welling in his eyes as he looked at these remarkable beings, 5 Draconis adolescents who had once been freezing eggs cradled against his heart, and his human daughter who had embraced an alien world with open arms. "I'm just a maintenance guy who did what needed doing," he said softly. "That," Thalen replied, "is precisely why you succeed where others might fail. The greatest changes often begin with the simplest acts of compassion." As the twin sons of Candaria sat behind the crystalline mountains, painting the now healing sky in shades of gold and nascent blue, Jack Sullivan, once a janitor, now a diplomat, educator, and heartbond guardian, embraced his extraordinary family. Human and Draconis, bound by love that transcended biology, united in purpose. Sometimes, saving a world begins with holding something precious close to your heart. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.